When we imagine a democracy falling, we usually picture tanks rolling through the Capitol and armed soldiers storming the parliament. We expect the end to look like a violent invasion. But more often than not, the door simply swings open from the inside. Authoritarian movements frequently walk right through the front door. They run in competitive elections, they organize political parties, and they use the legal protections of free speech to broadcast their message across the country. The crucial opening usually comes from within the establishment itself. Traditional conservative politicians and business leaders invite these extremists into governing coalitions, assuming they can tame radicals and use them to restore national order. Benito Mussolini became Prime Minister of Italy in 1922 through a negotiated royal appointment. A decade later, Adolf Hitler was legally sworn in as Germany's chancellor through a constitutional process. The defining danger of fascism lies in its ability to take a democracy's own laws, procedures, and institutions and turn them into the exact tools used to dismantle the system from within. This inside job requires fertile ground. Fascist movements thrive when a nation is fractured by deep economic distress, intense political polarization, and a widespread public fear of social collapse. This photo captures the sheer scale of desperation in interwar Europe. Children are literally playing with stacks of hyperinflated German marks because the currency had become entirely worthless. Conditions like this strip away public faith in established government. Fascist leaders seize on this misery. They frame the slow, necessary compromises of parliamentary debate as a fatal weakness, and they offer a seductive alternative: unified, aggressive, and decisive leadership. By convincing the public that ordinary political opponents are actually traitors and existential threats to the nation, these leaders lay the psychological groundwork needed to suspend normal democratic rules entirely. Once they secure a seat in government, the first major structural move is to exploit a sudden, massive crisis to trigger emergency powers. The burning of the German Reichstag building in 1933, seen here engulfed in smoke, serves as the historical blueprint for this tactic. The government uses the shock of the event to argue that public safety requires extraordinary measures. They quickly suspend core civil liberties, erasing protections for free speech, public assembly, privacy, and due process. With the emergency declared, they push through decrees that effectively bypass the elected legislature. Sweeping lawmaking authority transfers directly from the parliament to the executive branch. These temporary measures rarely expire. When emergency powers become normalized, the line separating lawful constitutional government from arbitrary dictatorial rule completely disappears. A common mistake is assuming that dictators simply burn down the old government. In reality, successful authoritarian regimes capture the existing state bureaucracy and keep it running. They systematically purge the civil service and the judiciary, forcing out politically neutral professionals and replacing them with unquestioning party loyalists. This creates a structural inversion. Government agencies and courts are originally designed to act as independent checks on executive power. Under institutional capture, they are absorbed and redirected to enforce the leader's will. A compliant legal system is especially crucial here. By keeping the courts open but populated entirely by loyal judges, the regime can cloak horrific human rights abuses in a veneer of official legality. This quiet takeover of the bureaucracy is fatal. It effectively removes all the internal levers that citizens need to legally challenge the regime's actions. Outside the halls of government, a healthy democracy relies on an independent civil society, universities, labor unions, and an active press. Fascist movements view these groups as unacceptable competitors for the public's loyalty. To dominate public information, the state takes control of mass communication, heavily utilizing household devices like this vintage radio. Independent journalism is censored or outlawed, replaced entirely by a singular, state-sanctioned narrative broadcast directly into homes. Independent trade unions face a similar fate. They are dismantled and replaced by state-controlled labor fronts that claim to represent workers while permanently stripping them of their right to strike or negotiate. At the street level, the regime weaponizes the law through selective enforcement. State police forces merge with unofficial, violent paramilitary squads, like Mussolini's black shirts, seen marching here. Official police turn a blind eye when regime supporters assault their political rivals. Meanwhile, those same police aggressively prosecute, detain, and imprison anyone associated with the opposition. You don't have to arrest every single dissident to control a population. Complete media control mixed with highly selective street violence creates a culture of intense fear, pushing the public into widespread self-censorship and quiet compliance. The result is a bizarre paradox. A fully captured state often still possesses a written constitution, and the government will insist that every action it takes is entirely legal. The outward theatrical aesthetics of democracy, like the massive political rallies shown here, continue to exist. Parliaments still meet and citizens still vote, but these institutions are completely subordinated to the leader, devoid of any real political competition. This model of hollow institutionalism was extremely effective. We see it not only in Germany and Italy, but in other European autocracies, like Portugal's Estado Novo under Antonio de Oliveira Salazar, pictured here. The mere presence of voting booths and legislative chambers does not make a country a democracy. Without political pluralism, judicial independence, and the ability to hold leaders accountable, those institutions are just empty shells. This historical blueprint is highly relevant today. Contemporary democratic backsliding uses almost the exact same process to erode free societies, without ever needing a military coup. Modern leaders steadily expand their executive reach and chip away at judicial independence. They mask these power grabs behind democratic-sounding rhetoric, convincing voters that institutional checks and balances are actually elitist obstacles to the will of the people. Ultimately, a constitution is just a piece of paper. It has no physical power to defend itself without the active, coordinated efforts of the people operating within that system. Defending a democracy requires broad, organized coalitions. Citizens, journalists, and civil servants have to recognize and actively oppose institutional capture at its earliest stages, long before emergency rule becomes the new normal.